Hi everybody, it's Jen. Welcome back to my channel, Hallmark Plus More, where we watch and talk about shows, movies, mysteries, Hallmark ornaments, and anything else that floats our boat. So today I'm going to be reviewing a Hallmark Channel original series, Chicken Sisters, Season 1, Episode 4. So before I get into the review, I just want to say thank you to everybody who likes my videos, subscribes to my channel, leaves me comments. I appreciate it so much. If you have any comments or discussion about this episode, you can leave it below. I love interacting with everybody. So getting into this episode, they do a previously on Chicken Sisters, right, with our wonderful narrator, talking about how we saw Amanda kissing Sergio, and then they show the little relationship between May and Sabrina Sky, how they kind of imply that they have a history or they know each other. So this was from a couple episodes ago, but I'm glad they showed that because that's telling me in this episode, hopefully we will find out the history between those two, because it definitely seems like it's not all friendly. So I have been really curious on how May and Sabrina Sky know each other. And then it starts out the episode with showing Nancy, as a young mother with Frank Jr. And you kind of see, her getting sad and depressed. It looks like sitting on the couch. And you see Frank Sr. So remember in this series, starting out season 1, episode 1, Frank Sr. has passed. So this is probably, one of the few times we're going to see Frank Sr. is in these flashbacks with Nancy. And he's like, you need to suck it up and move on. Your family needs you. So I feel like she's been kind of sad, and I think it's because she's not able to have more than one child. And you can tell she definitely wants more children, definitely a daughter. It doesn't really tell you why. It just seems like she's a little depressed. So they don't really tell you why she can't have children other than Frank Jr., but she sucks it up like her husband. And you can see as Frank Jr. gets older, she throws herself into raising Frank Jr. and being, the supportive wife. And then, of course, he marries Amanda, and she feels like she has a daughter, that she's always wanted in Amanda. So, Nancy feels like she's really happy now. She's got her son and her daughter. They don't show any flashbacks with Amanda's daughter, but they kind of imply that's part of her happiness too with Nancy. So you kind of see that Nancy's life isn't all happy. She did want more children, and for whatever reason, she didn't have them. Yeah, hopefully, we'll find out maybe later on what that entails. But then you kind of see Sabrina Sky come to film at Mimi's. And you see Gus and May kind of get into a spat, and Gus asks May to leave. So she leaves and isn't a part of that particular filming or clip. But they kind of get into a spat about money. And, you find out May has secretly been sending Gus money, disguised as a fan company, right? Because that's the only way May knew her mom would take the money, is if it was disguised as some other company. So that's definitely interesting. It's a backstory I wasn't really expecting. You hear me talk about how May's the snobby one, Nancy's the goody two shoes. I feel like I have a little name or nickname for every character. So I thought this was nice. May doesn't really come it across in a nice way. She kind of throws it in Gus's face. I'm doing this because you need my money, kind of thing. So it's like a nice gesture, but I don't feel like she was really saying it in a nice way when she was arguing with Gus. Nevertheless, it's still a nice gesture to send, your parent money without them knowing that they secretly need the money. You can tell throughout Amanda still feels guilty about Sergio, but she doesn't tell Frank Jr., not in this episode. However, you do want to know if her and Nancy have that discussion, right? Because Nancy saw them at the end of the last episode. So throughout this episode, I'm like, okay, are they going to talk? Like, how is that going to go? Because Nancy's so nice, and I just don't see her like bringing it up and being upset with Amanda. Because remember, this is the daughter she never had. I don't feel like she argues with Amanda very much, because she's always longed for that daughter figure. So that's going to be interesting. Nancy doesn't bring it up. She actually offers to do her hair and makeup for the big event in town called The Drop. So Shauna works as a waitress in Franny's, and apparently she works all over town, like part time. She works everywhere. She knows everything. She has a bunch of little side hustles. One of them is a leggings business called Live Laugh Leggings. And she has this big event called The Drop, right? Where she kind of shows off her new styles and people buy them. And it's like a big thing in town, right? All the ladies come. There's alcohol involved, drinking, and Gus even shows up, right? Gus shows up. She has a coupon, which of course Shauna knows her customers. Gus, of course, wants a coupon. And Gus pays for her leggings and leaves. She doesn't really stay for the party or the event. Sergio is actually celebrating finally officially being divorced. So he goes out on the town. Kenneth and Patrick convince him to. And they kind of go out. So you've got Kenneth and Patrick, Sergio, and then Gus comes. And they go to like a karaoke bar and kind of have a night out with the boys and Gus. So like I say, she goes to The Drop really just to pick up her leggings and leave. But everybody else in town, like the place basically shuts down for this big party, which drinking's involved. I'm sure there's gossip. Shauna actually invites Sabrina Sky, but she's like, yeah, thank you, but no thank you. But you know, she's a little preoccupied because she found out that her ex is marrying again, and he's marrying like a 25-year-old. So she's a little bit upset about that, right? So she's a little preoccupied, and she doesn't think it's a big deal. However, this is a small town and they all go to The Drop, right? So she convinces May to like cater, letting her know Sabrina's coming. So May thinks she can show off her, you know, skills for decorating and looking all elegant. And so she agrees, right? She goes, she kind of does everything all fancy. And Shauna's like, it's not a big deal. It's not all that, right? So everybody's there. Amanda, Nancy, Gus leaves. They had have a little talk with her very briefly, but May is there. Everybody's there. So at the same time as this is going on, Frank Jr. is meeting up with somebody called Mr. Chicken. He is the owner of Mr. Chicken Cluckery. His real name is Kristen Pierce. And he like stalks him. He's a judge on Kitchen Clash. And Frank goes to the inn, knows when he's going to arrive, and kind of waits for him in the lobby. This is the different side of Frank Jr., so to speak, because every time we see him, he is not excited. It's almost like, you know, the way he treats his mom, the way he treats his wife. Haven't seen him interact a lot with his daughter, so I don't know exactly how he is as a father. Most of the scenes with their daughter, it's with Amanda or Sabrina Sky's daughter, the teenagers. So I'm not sure how he is as a father. However, the way he goes about the rest of his life, he really kind of takes everybody for granted. Even his work ethic, you know, when he finally dresses up and takes care of the business, he stays the night and closes up, and then he gets all cranky because he has to clean everything, which his wife and his mom do every other day, and they're not complaining, but it's like he turns sour when he actually has to do, you know, manual labor and actually clean stuff. So his work ethic is poor. He treats people badly. So to see him all like a kid in a candy store and all excited and nervous and anxious to meet this Mr. Chicken person is a different side of Frank Jr., right? And then he comes into the inn, you see Mr. Chicken, and he just kind of comes in a little cocky, right? And he meets Frank Jr. And of course, he can tell right away that Frank Jr. is like hanging on his every word, right? Where can I get a drink in town? And Frank Jr. is like, you can get one at Franny's. And, he takes them to Franny's, opens it up. And so now they're drinking at Frank Jr.'s restaurant, Franny's. And he takes them through town, takes them through Main Street. And like I say, he's just hanging on every word he's saying. And Mr. Chicken is noticing it. So he's like, okay, I'm going to reel him in, right? There's just something I don't like about him. I know I mentioned that he's cocky, but he just comes across as almost like one of those scammers, like just fake, right? Like it's a pyramid scheme and he's going to try to soak Frank Jr. for everything he's got. I just get that vibe from him. I don't think he's a good guy, but Frank is just hanging on to everything, eating everything up, right? And Mr. Chicken asked Frank Jr. to be a beta tester in a new app program called Hard with two D's, HARDD. It's medication for men with vision, he calls it, which right away I think is a complete scam. I'm like, what the heck is he talking about? Like, seriously, hard. And then he says, I want you to be a tester for this new app. I think you'll be perfect. And of course, Frank's like, yeah, sure. He's like, I want to franchise Franny's. Then he tells him about, what he wants to do. And he kind of talks to him and kind of says, look, I have my motto, always looking forward, never looking back. Be unapologetic. Those are the mottos that I live by. So Frank Jr. is like, okay, unapologetic, like strong, confident. And I get that, I get the confidence. I get the, strong-willed, I get that. But being unapologetic, when he said that, I was like, I don't know. Everybody has to have that human element. We're all, need to be humble. We need to understand where people are coming from. So I already didn't get a good vibe when I met him. Like, okay, this is a cocky SOB. Like, I'm not going to believe anything he says. And he catches on to Frank Jr. knowing that he can, reel him in with anything he says. So I'm just like, okay, what about this app? Like, what is this going to cost him? Because I just feel like he's a scammer. So that's definitely going to be interesting because, of course, Frank's like, sure, I'll beta test it. So that's going to be interesting because I'm sure we're going to see, Mr. Chicken throughout this season because he's a judge on Kitchen Clash. And I think it's going to be a little bit of this side story of Frank Jr. and Mr. Chicken. But yes, so getting back to, the drop, right? So everybody is showing up. All the ladies in town are coming. Everybody's drinking. Apparently, Shauna has her own chocolate wine or some kind of her own concoction that she makes. And, Nancy says, oh, do you need more sodas? Like being the good host that she's always willing to help. She goes to the garage to get more sodas. And Amanda sees her opening. So she goes into the garage to get Nancy alone. And she's like, are we going to talk about this? And she really just tells Nancy, like, look, Sergio sees me. I feel like and Nancy's like, let me stop you right there. And I'm like, okay, is Nancy going to turn all like, mean or what's she going to say? Right. And not what I expected at all. Nancy doesn't lecture her. Nancy actually tells Amanda a story about her and her husband, Frank Sr. So again, the beginning of the episode talked about Frank Sr. Now we're seeing it again. Nancy says Frank Sr. cheated on her with Gus. So, that was just like, what did I just hear? That shocked me. And then of course she says, Frank Sr. fessed up to me and he proposed to me the very next day. So Nancy's like, of course I forgave him. Marriage is hard work and nobody is perfect. Which I completely agree. Marriage is just like any other job or relationship you're in. It can be a wonderful thing, but you still got to work at it. So I like what she said because I do believe that as well, that marriage is hard work and nobody is perfect. Um, but Frank Sr. cheated on Nancy with Gus. That's just hard for me to believe. Not that there's anything wrong with Gus or Frank Sr., but I just don't see what we've seen of Gus so far being interested in Nancy's husband. She just doesn't seem the type, not necessarily that she's too good to cheat on people. I just don't see Gus interested in Nancy's husband. I just feel like I don't see her doing that. Now, obviously, we don't know because that was in the past. Frank Sr. is past, Gus is older. Nancy's had Frank Jr. This was 20 some years ago, but I was just kind of thrown by that. I was like, okay, obviously you're going to believe your fiance, your husband, but obviously Gus denies it. But I don't know. I just feel like there's more to that story because it just didn't sit with me right. And then Amanda, after having that conversation, she feels guilty, even though, she's not in a good place with Frank Jr. He's still her husband, so she calls Sergio, leaves him a voicemail, basically ends it, right? Sergio listens to it because remember, he's out at the karaoke bar with Patrick, Kenneth, and Gus. And then just thumbs up it, like I understand, I like. And so Amanda kind of has a sigh of relief, like, okay, he listened to my voicemail. He understands nothing can happen, right? And then you find out, yay, finally, Sabrina's guy shows up at the drop. And finally, the narrator, love the narrator, she explains the history, the kind of backstory of May and Sabrina Sky. So I'm really glad we hear that because I knew there was some kind of history there, and I was like, okay, tell me what's going on because they're fake saying hi, but they don't really like each other. So a long time ago, when Sabrina Sky, had her daughter and she was married, she tried out to be a TV host, and May, they were friends. They were both kind of making it in Hollywood. However, Sabrina's husband had money. So like May and them would go out to lunch, May and Sabrina. And May kind of faked it, letting everybody believe she had money, but she was really broke and could barely pay her bills. But Sabrina Sky is living it up. They're shopping. She's pushing her little baby carriage with their daughter in it. And, May was embarrassed, didn't want to tell Sabrina, like, hey, I don't have as much money as you. Like, I'm house sitting. I don't really live here. So they're both struggling, right? Sabrina wants to make a name for herself too, even though her husband has money. So she tells her friend May about a job audition that she's going to have in New York. And May actually goes to the audition, tries out before her because Sabrina's waiting for the audition and she sees May walk out. So she obviously feels betrayed by May, and May actually gets the job and that starts her career. So, she obviously has this resentment over May kind of taking my job audition and then getting the job, right? You only heard about it from me and then you undermine me by going early and getting the job. So what we find out is Sabrina didn't have a lot of money either. She was getting divorced and all the money was her husband's. So she really wanted to prove she could work on her own, make her own money, get her own place near her daughter's school. Since she didn't get that job, she had to give up full custody to her ex-husband. Like her ex-husband got full custody because she didn't have a stable job close to her daughter's school. So, that's a big deal, right? So she has resentment towards May. So it's one of those things where you're keeping up with appearances and you don't want people to know that you're struggling, right? And it turns out if all they did was talk and talk it out and was honest with each other, maybe they wouldn't have this resentment so many years later. I don't see there's anything wrong with telling people the truth. I mean, I struggle all the time with a lot of things, finances being one of them. So I understand, but I also get it. I guess, she kind of wanted to keep up with appearances. And Sabrina agreed, she kind of wanted to keep up with appearances to May. So they were both struggling. And I think it's an embarrassment, kind of like a personal shame thing. So I get it, but at the same time, you want to be very honest about stuff. So I'm glad they told us that backstory. I really wanted to know what that beef was between the two because them saying hi at the beginning a couple episodes ago, you could tell was totally fake. So I'm glad they told us that story. And then as the party goes on, right, you kind of see people drinking. And Sabrina, said to somebody, like, why is this such happening? It's kind of lame. She's like, oh, no, no, the fun hasn't happened yet. So apparently, what happens at this event is Shauna hosts it. Everybody buys a legging, see the new styles. And then towards the end, Shauna gets really drunk and just starts gossiping, right? Because remember, she's worked everywhere, she knows everybody. She knows everybody's business, right? So apparently she has part-time jobs everywhere. So everybody goes to the drop, not to buy the leggings, not for the food, but to see Shauna kind of like go off and tell everybody secrets, right? So you're like, oh, okay, so that's why everybody goes to the drop. So Shauna just kind of, has too much alcohol and she just starts spatting this stuff out. Well, do you know why? This person has this. Well, it's not because of this. And everybody's just kind of shocked because Shauna just starts talking and she's just telling secrets about everything. Amanda gets sick. I think she starts thinking about like, Frank Jr. or Sergio, and she goes to the bathroom and throws up. Some of the girls hear her throw up and go, ooh, Amanda really didn't drink anything tonight. Why is she getting sick? So then people are like, oh, well, maybe she's pregnant. And then, of course, Shauna's going on her rant. She's like, oh, she can't be pregnant because, Frank Jr., and of course, she's all drunk. Frank Jr. came into the office last year to get a vasectomy. So Amanda can't be pregnant. Right? And everybody's like, what? And everybody's kind of quiet. And Amanda had came out of the bathroom. So she heard Shauna. So she's like, obviously she's not pregnant, right? Her husband had a vasectomy. She didn't, she just kissed Sergio. She was just sick to her stomach. So she's shocked. Like her mouth drops. Like she had no idea. And remember, Frank Jr. is hanging that over her head. We can try for a baby. Yeah, we can try, Frank Jr. says. And then we have to win this money, the 100,000. You want another baby, don't you? So like he's been kind of baiting her. Like, I know you want another baby. This is what you can do to get it, or we can try. Which is just a man's way of saying, I want to have sex, right? Any woman who wants to get pregnant, the man's always like, let's try. The woman wants to get pregnant, the man just wants to have sex. So when he says that, now you're realizing he knew we couldn't get pregnant. Like he knew he had it last year. The other person that heard was Nancy. So you can tell by the look on Nancy's face, she had no idea her son did that. So you got Amanda and Nancy both shocked to hear this information. And Shauna, I mean, she's just gossiping, which apparently she does at every drop because the girls are like, oh no, you got to stick around for when Shauna says everything. So, I mean, Amanda leaves, right? She already got sick. Now she hears about Frank Jr. and she's feeling guilty about Sergio. She calls it off with Sergio. I can't see you anymore. And he's like, yeah. So, I mean, she's got a lot of emotions. She talks to Nancy. Nancy tells her that her mom, Gus, cheated on Nancy, with her boyfriend at the time, now her husband. So, I mean, she's got a lot to deal with. So she just leaves. Nancy kind of walks out. We think she leaves, but she's hanging around the party until the end because she questions Shauna about it. And after the party, she does question Shauna about it. And Shauna was like, yeah, I'm sorry, Nancy, but that is true. He came in and he had the operation. Because Nancy was like, "Are you sure you weren't mistaken?" In her nice little voice. So she's like, "But aren't you glad you know? Isn't it better to know?" And Nancy doesn't really say anything, and then she finally leaves. But meanwhile, like everybody heard that, including May, because remember May's still there. So May's like, okay, I've had enough. Like, and she goes off. She basically tells everybody, like, look, do you have nothing better to do than gossip about me, my sister, my mom? Like, is that all you have in your lives is to gossip about us? You have nothing better to do? And then the other people are like, no, not really. Like, no, we don't have anything to do but gossip about your family, right? Every small town has somebody that is at, the center of drama and gossip. So she tells everybody her business. Like, look, I'm going to tell everybody what's going on with me. I lied to my boyfriend. I'm ashamed of here. My first job was at this donkey restaurant. Like, she really tells everybody her personal business and kind of goes off on everybody. And then she leaves. And then everybody, for some reason or other, starts turning at each other and starts arguing. So now the whole party is like yelling at each other. Well, your husband does this and your next door neighbor does this and blah, blah. So they're not just yelling at each other. They're like gossiping and saying, I know you do this and I know you do that. Meanwhile, Sabrina Sky, in her fashion, of course, is filming it with her phone. So she heard May go off on herself. She already knew about her job at Donkey Z or whatever it's called, but she was filming her going off on herself. And then she started filming everybody else, telling everybody other secrets to them. So the party kind of got interesting when everybody was expecting Shauna to go off drunk, telling everybody secrets, but then they didn't expect, May to go off. They didn't expect everybody else to kind of yell at each other. So I'm just like watching this scene going, whoa, there's a lot of gossip and information going on here. It was just kind of a lot to take in, right? So, Amanda goes home, right? She leaves, and Frank Jr. comes home completely oblivious that Amanda is, upset or having a moment, right? Because remember, Frank Jr. is completely self-absorbed. Always been that way. Like he is all about me, 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 right? He talks down to everybody. He disrespects all the women in his life, probably his daughter. Like I say, we haven't seen a lot of that relationship. But he gets all excited, coming home, telling Amanda, I spoke to Mr. Chicken. This is our conversation. Um, and Amanda basically confronts him and says, um, did you do this? Right? Like, I know. Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to get to that part. Amanda tells him, like, I know what you did. I know you got a vasectomy. I know you can't have any more children. And I don't think Frank Jr. was expecting to be confronted, right? Because he did this last year. Amanda never found out about it. He's off of this, happy, excited time with Mr. Chicken. So he's thinking of, the motto of Mr. Chicken. So Amanda says, what? Are you not sorry for what you did, for not telling me, from keeping it from me? And he goes, I'm unapologetic. And he says that kind of like matter of factly, unapologetic. Because he is going over what Mr. Chicken kind of installed in him tonight, right? Because he's a beta tester for his new app. And of course, Amanda, I mean, that doesn't sit right with her. I don't think it would sit right with anybody. If my husband got a vasectomy, that's one thing. But the second thing is not telling me, and the third thing that's very big is making me believe we have a chance to have another baby. I think that would upset me the most. Not that you went and did it without telling me, but that you got my hopes up and was like, we can try. Don't you want another baby? Don't you know that? Like he was baiting her, knowing they were never going to have another child because he had the surgery. So I think that's what pisses me the most off with Frank Jr.'s behavior. Not necessarily that he got it, right? Because he can do whatever he wants to his body. He should discuss it with his spouse. But, women say women's rights is my body. It's his body. It's his, he can do what he wants and have the surgery. But you don't tell your wife, we can have another baby. We can try. We can do this. Isn't this what you want? Knowing the whole time there's no way you can impregnate your wife. I think that's what's infuriating me if I were Amanda. So Amanda's like, okay, you're not even going to apologize. I can forgive a lot of things. I put up with a lot with you. However, I can put up with a lot, but I can't forgive this, which I kind of understand where Amanda's coming from, right? She's upset. And she has every right to be upset because Frank hid that from her. And like I said, didn't just hide it, but made her believe that they can keep trying, which is terrible because that's a lie. There's no way they can keep trying. They're not going to have a baby. So the very last scene is you see Amanda knocking on the door and she goes, "Can I stay here tonight?" You don't know. I mean, obviously somebody opened the door, but you don't know who it was. So of course things are going in my mind, like, where did she go? Did she go to her mom's house? I thought maybe she went to like the hotel room, maybe where her sister's staying. Only because if you look at the previews for the next week, you see that the sisters are getting along. It's almost like they're in their PJs. So I'm like, okay, whose door did she knock on? Did she go to Nancy's house? Like, she went somewhere. Can I stay with you? So I think that's kind of the mystery for next week. And then, like I mentioned, you see the sisters somehow make up because they're, jumping around in bags in their pajamas, like in potato sacks. So they must have got along at some point. So maybe that's where she went. Who knows? And then you see the preview for next week with the pastor in church going, "Are we really fighting over chicken?" And I thought that was funny that, the pastor, has them mention it in a sermon. So a lot of information happened in this episode. One thing that I thought was clever was at the very end of the drop party, you find out Shauna wasn't really drunk. She is just a great businesswoman. And May was like, "Wow, you're an icon." Because May figured out, like, hey, you weren't drunk. So she did this all on her own. That's part of her marketing. Like, I'm going to bring everybody to my house, and then everybody's going to buy my leggings. And then at the end, I'm going to act all drunk and spill the beans because that's what everybody comes for, is the gossip. So, I mean, to me, when I heard that, I'm like, yeah, you go, Shauna. Like, that's a smart move because nobody was onto her, right? So definitely kind of a little surprise that you saw in this episode that it turns out she wasn't even drunk. She was in her right mind the whole time. It was all acting to sell her side business of the leggings. So brilliant business move, of course. So definitely excited for next week to see what happens. And even with Frank Jr., I'm sure this isn't the last we're going to see of Mr. Chicken. I just hope he doesn't take them for all they're worth, because I feel like this is one of the beginning of one of those scam stories. He's building, Frank Jr.'s trust with the app. So we'll see what happens. I hope you enjoyed my discussion. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Very entertaining. And until next time, I will see you then. Bye.